Welcome back to Phil Always Wins. UFC 326, Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira is right around the corner, and we're going to be doing a full card breakdown. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow me on Instagram to be the first to know about my weekly UFC bets. To kick off the early prelims, we have Luke Fernandez taking on Rodolfo Bellato in a light heavyweight bout. I'm backing Luke Fernandez to get the win here, and he is a favorite coming into this fight at a times 1.45. While Rodolfo Bellato is sitting at a times 2.85. Luke Fernandez is 6-0, making his debut in the UFC, coming off a win in the Contender Series via KO in round 1 against Rafael. That fight only lasted 30 seconds, and in all honesty, there isn't much footage of Fernandez, but he does have abnormal power, as 5 of his 6 wins have come by knockout, with only 1 going to the decision. I think this is going to be a quick night for Rodolfo Bellato. You know, he's shown a lot of durability issues in his fights, where he gets rocked very easily, and against a power puncher like Fernandez, I think he'll get knocked out once again. Rodolfo Bellato is 12-3. He's 1-1 in the UFC, coming off a decision loss to Navajo Sterling. But prior to that fight, he had a no contest against Craig Paul, where he got illegally knocked out on the ground, which kind of worried me because it seemed like he had some sort of spasm afterwards. But generally, Rodolfo is one of those fighters that's on my do not bet list because he just can't take a punch. Not only can he not take a punch, but he can't avoid punches either. He tends to not move his head at all, and he always seems to move backwards to avoid getting hit. So if Fernandez pressures him against the cage, I reckon he could land a clean shot that'll knock Bellato out cold. So give me Luke Fernandez to win via KO. Next up, we have a featherweight bout between Jeong and Gaston Bolanos, where Bolanos is coming into this fight as a times 3 underdog, and Jeong is sitting at a times 1.4. Personally, I'm backing Jeong to get the win here, but this is going to be a very fun fight. We have 2 strikers going head to head who are both coming off losses, so both of them are going to be very desperate to get back in the winning column. Jeong is 11-3. He's 2-2 in the UFC, and he's coming into this fight on 5 days notice. But even though he's fighting on short notice, he's a very talented striker who fights at a high pace and has shown solid durability. He's absorbed clean shots in his past fights, and it didn't seem to bother him all too much. Even in his fight against Haider Amil, he got TKO'd, but he didn't even get knocked down. The ref just simply stepped in because he was getting hit too much. So it was a standing TKO, but it speaks to the durability of his chin. He can really take a punch without going down. Jeong is a forward pressing striker who likes to be the aggressor. He throws long combinations, keeps constant pressure, and forces opponents to fight at a high pace. Gaston, on the other hand, he tends to fight at a steady rhythm, and I think Jeong may be able to overwhelm him with his volume strikes. Gaston Bolanos, aka Ilia Topuria's twin, is 9-5. He's 2-2 in the UFC, and he's coming off a round 2 submission loss to Li Kwang. Gaston is a technical striker with solid fundamentals and decent power. I like that he's composed on the feet, and he's capable of landing clean counters. But in his fight against Marcus McGee, he did lose via TKO, where it was a pure striking matchup, and I think this fight is going to play out similarly, where Jeong is going to overwhelm Gaston with his speed and long combination, and I reckon he could get the victory in round 2 via KO. Jeong only seems to struggle when his opponents have the ability to grapple, which is normally needed because of how fast and precise he is on the feet, but Gaston is a pure striker, and I don't think his striking will be enough for him to win this fight. Next up, we have a light heavyweight bout between Diyar Nurgozhay and Rafael Tobias. Tobias is sitting as a massive favorite at times 1.45, and Diyar is sitting at a times 2.85. And to put it straight, I think Tobias is going to win. He's 14-1. He's making his UFC debut after earning a contract with a round 1 submission in the Contender Series against Jair de Oliveira. He's a forward pressing, heavy-hitting fighter with tremendous power. He doesn't just rely on striking either. While he can absolutely finish you on the feet, he's also capable on the ground and has submission wins on his record. That makes him dangerous in multiple places of the fight and not just a one-dimensional power puncher. On the other hand, we have Diyar, who is 10-2. He's 0-2 in the UFC, coming off a 2-fight losing streak, with both losses coming by way of submission. On the feet, Diyar is a more stiff, upright striker, but he does carry a lot of power. He even scored a knockout win in the Contender Series against Bartos with a nasty high kick, which kind of shows that if he lands the right shots, he can be dangerous. However, I think Tobias is superior on the feet. He's faster, slicker, and more fluid in his combinations. He also has the option to bring this fight to the ground if he chooses to, which adds another layer to his advantage. Tobias is well-rounded enough to potentially stun Diyar on the feet, force him into defensive mode, then capitalize by taking the fight to the ground and securing a submission win. I reckon Tobias is going to win in round 2 via submission. Next up, we have a flyweight bout between Mudaerji and Santos Aguilar. Coming into this fight, Mudaerji is a favorite, sitting at a times 1.37, while Aguilar is sitting at a times 3.2. I think the underdog Aguilar is going to get the win here. Jesus Aguilar is 12-3. He's 5-2 in the UFC, coming off a unanimous decision win as an underdog against Luis Gurule. Aguilar is the shorter fighter here, and I think he'll look to turn this into a dogfight by getting up close and fighting in the pocket. I really like that he throws combinations of 4 to 5 punches at a time. He doesn't just throw one single shot. He also mixes in takedowns, which is very important because we've seen Mudaerji struggle against opponents who pressure him and threaten grappling. Mudaerji is 18-7. He's 5-4 in the UFC, coming off back-to-back wins via decision. He's a decent striker who prefers to fight at his range, picking his shots carefully from a distance, and often waiting to counter. Mudaerji is the taller fighter, and while that usually helps with range striking, I actually think it could benefit Aguilar here because it may make it easier for him to level change and secure the takedowns. I reckon Aguilar could pull off the upset here by constantly pressuring him backwards, overwhelming him with long combinations, then mixing in the takedowns to secure a unanimous decision win. Next up, we have another flyweight bout between Tumendemberel and Cody Durden. Tumendemberel is a slight favorite here, sitting at a times 1.68, while Cody Durden is the underdog, sitting at a times 2.24. And I reckon the underdog is going to win. Cody Durden is 17-9. He's 4-6 in the UFC, so he does have more losses than wins in the UFC, and he is coming off back-to-back losses, but Durden is a very aggressive striker who constantly brings the pressure. Even in fights he loses, he almost always has his moments in the fight where he hurts his opponents. In his last fight against Alan Nascimento, Durden was actually dominating the striking exchanges, landing the cleaner shots and controlling the pace, before he got clipped and eventually submitted. Durden's biggest advantage here might be his ability to mix things up. While he's aggressive on the feet, he also has solid wrestling and can blend takedowns into his striking. On the other hand, we have Tumendemberel, who is 9-1. He's 3-1 in the UFC, coming off a first-round submission win over Terence Satram. He's a legitimate prospect with promising striking skills. He has fast hands, he's confident in exchanges, and he has decent power as well. He also does have submission threats in his arsenal, but I feel like defensively, his grappling hasn't always looked as polished as his striking. Tumendemberel's only loss in the UFC occurred because he got out-grappled in round 2 and 3 after dominating the striking in round 1. If Durden can mix in the takedowns, that could make Tumendemberel hesitate to throw heavy shots and overextend. That hesitation could allow Durden to land the heavier shots and maybe even get the KO win. So I'm going to take a shot at this. I think the underdog Cody Durden will be able to get it done via KO in round 2. Next up, we have a featherweight bout between Ricky Turcios taking on Montes Alberto. Ricky is the slight underdog here, sitting at a times 2.6. whilst Alberto is the favorite here, sitting at a times 1.53. I do think Alberto is going to win here. He's 11-1, making his debut in the UFC, winning his prior fight via round 2 submission in the Contender Series against Carlos Calderon. Alberto is a very well-rounded fighter. He has crisp boxing, and I like that he's able to handle himself on the ground too. Ricky's gonna try and grapple, but I think he may get himself into a dangerous position and possibly get submitted. Ricky is 13-5. He's 2-3 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight losing streak, losing one of his fights via submission to Chiwiwi and one via decision to Bernardo Sopaj. He doesn't really impress me as a fighter. He's primarily a grappler, and his game plan is going to be to hug his way to either a decision win or to get a submission. If this fight stays on the feet, I think Ricky's going to get overwhelmed with the speed and volume of Montes and most probably get TKO'd. He needs to try and mix in the striking with takedowns, but I don't think he'll be able to handle a prospect as dangerous as Montes. I think Montes will be able to defend the takedowns and even get some takedowns for himself. And I reckon this fight will play out mostly on the ground, where Montes will be able to grab a round 2 submission win. Next up, we have a middleweight bout between Donte Johnson and Cody Brundage. Cody Brundage is the biggest underdog on this card, sitting at a times 5.4, while Donte is sitting at a times 1.17. For obvious reasons, I am taking Donte Johnson to win this fight. He is 7-0, making his debut in the UFC after winning in the finals of the Road to UFC in round 2 via submission against Dumas. Johnson is a massive prospect in the middleweight division, and I think he's going to absolutely bully Cody Brundage. Johnson is a very composed fighter. In his last fight against Dumas, he was able to stay composed when Dumas was controlling him, and ultimately he flipped the tables and he got the finish. I think wherever the fight goes, Johnson has the advantage. If this fight stays on the feet, he has crazy knockout power, and if it takes place on the ground, Johnson has some nice grappling skills, and he also poses some submission threats. All of his 7 wins have come by way of finish, and this may be his 8th. On the other hand, we have Cody Brundage, who is 11-8. He's 3-6 in the UFC, and he's coming off a KO loss to Cam Rouston in round 2. He's now on a 2-fight losing streak, and in all honesty, he's just an average fighter. He's easy to read, and he isn't very durable either. He's not good at wrestling, he isn't good at striking, he's just good at losing. Not to mention, Johnson also has a massive athleticism advantage, and I think he'll be able to knock Brundage out in round 1 or round 2. Next up, we have a bantamweight bout between Cody Garbrandt and Xiao, and I reckon that Cody's going to be able to snatch the victory here. He is sitting as a slight underdog at times 2.25, while Xiao is sitting at a slight favorite at times 1.68. Cody Garbrandt, the former champion, is 14-7. He's 8-7 in the UFC, and he's coming off a loss to Barcelos in his last fight. Cody is very precise and slick with his boxing, and he's got such good head movement and footwork. He's one of the quickest fighters in the bantamweight division, and his footwork really makes him hard to hit. He loves to throw long, quick combinations. He doesn't just throw 1 to 3 punches. He throws 4 to 5 to 6 punches. However, whenever Cody's opponent has the ability to wrestle or grapple, he tends to struggle and always loses that fight. This has happened so many times where he's dominating on the feet and then gets taken down and either subbed or controlled and loses via decision. On the bright side, I've never seen Xiao do anything else other than stand and strike, and he may find himself in some trouble if he decides to do that. Xiao is 27-10. He's 3-3 in the UFC, coming off a unanimous decision loss to Su Yong-yu. Xiao is an aggressive fighter who begins to pressure you from the get-go. He does have 1 KO win in the UFC against Quang Lee, which came in the 3rd round, but what I didn't like was that he left his chin open to trade with Quang, and he even got stunned a couple of times throughout that fight. If Xiao doesn't mix in any grappling, I trust Cody's striking and experience way more, and I reckon he could stun him 1 to 2 times, maybe even get the finish. But I reckon the most likely outcome is for Cody to win via decision. And just like that, we are on the main card where we have a bantamweight fight between Gregory Rodriguez taking on Bruno Ferreira. Bruno Ferreira is a decent underdog here, sitting at a times 2.7, while Gregory Robocop Rodriguez is sitting at a times 1.5. I reckon Gregory Rodriguez, aka Robocop, is going to be able to get the win here. He's 18-6. 9-2 in the UFC, and he's on a 2-fight winning streak. Robocop has one of the nastiest KO power in the middleweight division. 6 of his 9 wins in the UFC have come by way of KO, and I think he'll get his 7th after this fight. He's by no means a technical fighter, and his fights are always absolute wars. There's a noticeable size difference in this fight. Robocop is 6'3" with an 8-inch reach advantage, while Ferreira is 5'10". I love that Robocop always throws with intent. He's always the one forward pressing, and I reckon that Bruno Ferreira may struggle to survive the pressure. Now, Bruno Ferreira is 15-2, he's 5-2 in the UFC, and is currently on a 2-fight winning streak. Ferreira has quick hands and combinations, but to be honest, I wasn't too impressed in his last fight, where he won via decision to Martin Vettori. He did enough to get the job done, but he never looked all too dangerous in that fight. He never seemed to really hurt Vettori at any moment in the fight. Funnily enough, Ferreira won his debut against Robocop back in 2023, where he knocked him out cold in late round 1 and cashed as a plus 400 underdog. RoboCop was, I wouldn't say dominating, but he was definitely controlling the fight and the pace up until he got clipped. I don't think he'll be any wiser in this fight. And what I mean by that is I think he'll have the same approach as last time and still be the aggressor, but I reckon he can get the KO this time out. Next up, we have a lightweight bout between Drew Dober and Michael Johnson. Now, in my opinion, this is the most 50-50 fight on the card. The books have Drew Dober sitting at a times 1.99 and Michael Johnson sitting at a times 1.86. But ultimately, I do think Michael Johnson will edge the win here. Michael Johnson is 25-19. He's 15-15 in the UFC, and he's been fighting in the UFC since 2010. Both of these guys are veterans of the sport, and there's not much of an age gap. Michael Johnson being 39 and Dober being 37. Michael Johnson is currently rocking a 3-fight win streak, with his most recent win being over Zellhuber as a plus 500 underdog. I love his aggression, and he's one of those fighters who doesn't mind to trade a punch for a punch. Although this is most likely going to be a stand-up fight, I do like that Michael Johnson is able to mix in takedowns, which I think he may shoot for 2 to 3 takedowns in this fight, just to keep Dober thinking of the possibility. But Drew Dober is 28-15. He's 13-11 in the UFC, and he's been fighting in the UFC since 2013. Dober is as tough as they come, and he's equally as fast as Michael Johnson. If you watched his last fight against Kyle Propolek, it was 1-1 coming into the 3rd round, and he lost a point due to a nut shot and was able to get the KO win. I love it when fighters are able to realize the urgency they need to win the fight and go out there and put on the pressure and get the win. Dober is a similar fighter to Johnson in the sense that he doesn't mind to stand and trade. The only reason I'm favoring Michael Johnson over Drew Dober here is simply because of the power difference. We've seen Michael Johnson hurt his last 2 opponents, and we've seen Dober get clipped at the end of round 1 in his last fight when he decided to stand and trade. I think Johnson will clip Dober when they both decide to exchange, so I have Johnson to win via KO in round 2. Next up, we have a bantamweight fight between Rob Font and Raul Rosas Chiwiwi, where I think Chiwiwi is going to get the win here. He is a major favorite sitting at a times 1.44, while Rob Font is an underdog sitting at 2.9. Mr. Chiwiwi is 11-1. He's 5-1 in the UFC and is currently rocking a 4-fight win streak. He's the significantly younger fighter at 21 compared to Rob Font, who's 38, and I'd like to believe that Font is almost at the end of his career. Raul loves to wrestle, and I don't think Font is going to be able to stop the takedowns because Raul is so much younger, so much stronger, and so much faster. Raul is entering his prime, and he has so much momentum coming into this fight. I think he's just full of confidence, and I think he's going to fully dominate Rob Font. Now, Rob Font is 22-9. He's 10-6 in the UFC, and he's coming off a loss via decision to David Martinez. Generally, Rob has slick boxing, and he'll definitely want this fight to take place on the feet, because that's where he's good at. Font does have the experience advantage, having fought in the UFC since 2014, and he's fought fighters such as Khabib, Figueiredo, and Sanhagen, which he lost to all of them, by the way. But experience can't always win you fights, and this is a setup from the UFC for Raul to win against an aging ranked opponent and get himself into the rankings himself. So I reckon that Chiwiwi is either going to be able to grab a submission or completely dominate him on the ground and win a unanimous decision. And now for the co-main event of the evening, we have Reinier de Ridder taking on Caio Borralho. Reinier de Ridder is a major underdog at times 3.3, and Caio Borralho is a major favorite sitting at times 1.35. I personally think that Reinier de Ridder is going to win here. I'm taking the underdog. Reinier de Ridder, or as I like to call him, Reinier the Quitter, is 21-3, 4-1 in the UFC. De Ridder is a heavy grappler, and he's really good at breaking fighters down in the clinch and on the ground. That's definitely going to be his game plan for this fight as well. But the reason I call him Reinier the Quitter is because he literally gave up after the 4th round in his last fight against Brandon Allen. He just got outgrappled in round 2, 3, and 4, which was surprising because that's supposed to be his strong suit. He ate some nasty ground and pound to the point where he was gassed out and couldn't continue off the stool. He told his coaches he was done and they called the fight. I think he didn't just get broken physically, but mentally as well. However, I feel like he just went through too many weight cuts that year. This was his 4th fight in 2025. So I'll let it slide. Coming into that fight with Brandon Allen, Reinier the Quitter was a very heavy favorite because he was beating fighter after fighter. The Ritter has fought way better opponents than Borralho has. He fought Kevin Holland, where it wasn't even a close fight, and he ended up getting the round 1 submission win. He's fought and beat one of my favorite prospects, Bo Nickel, where he literally broke him down with heavy knees and secured a round 2 TKO. His most recent win was against Robert Whittaker, which to me was his most impressive win. It was a close fight and he won via split decision. He did almost get finished in round 4, but he ended up securing the win. Borralho, the other hand, is 17-2. He's 7-1 in the UFC, but in my opinion, he's the least talented fighter from the fighting nerds. He's coming off a unanimous decision loss to Imavov, and I wasn't too surprised he lost that fight. He got outstruck and Imavov had the bigger moments within the fight. If we look at Borralho's past, who has he really fought? He's beaten an aging Cannonier. He's KO'd Paul Craig, who isn't even that good. And the rest of his fights were against unranked opponents. The only time he's fought a ranked opponent in the UFC is the only time he's lost. Not to mention, I don't think he's fought anybody who's got as good as grappling as Reinier the Ritter. Borralho does have a pretty diverse skill set. He can strike pretty well and he can also grapple. But I feel like Reinier the Ritter is going to make this fight a snooze fest and pin Borralho to the cage, land some knees within the clinch and try to tire him out, eventually taking him down and just hanging onto his back the entire 3 rounds. I reckon the Ritter gets it done via decision. And now we have the main event of the evening. We have Max Holloway taking on Charles Oliveira, and I have Max Holloway to win. He is a heavy favorite sitting at times 1.4, while Charles Oliveira is sitting at times 2.9. Although I do see the value in betting on Charles Oliveira, at the end of the day, this is a prediction video and I have to choose who I think is going to win, and I think Max Holloway is going to win. Max is coming off retiring Dustin Poirier in his last fight, where he dominated all 5 rounds, and I could see the same thing happening here. For all the casuals out there, Max and Charles have fought before, way back in 2015, where Oliveira seemed to pick up a shoulder injury in round 1, so nothing really happened in that fight and they called the fight early. Max is a rangy fighter and I love how he can fight in the pocket as well. He's definitely going to try and keep this fight on the feet because he's the way better striker here. He has way better combinations. He's faster, not just with his hands, but with his kicks too. I love that he's improving after every fight as well and adding new combinations to his arsenal, like the spinning back kick that he threw in round 2 against Gaethje. So the real question is, will Max's striking be enough to prevent the takedowns from Oliveira? Well, Charles Oliveira is coming off his submission win to Gamrot in round 2, which I don't know how people thought this was going to be a close fight. He was fighting at home. He went in there in good old Charles fashion and completely dominated him on the ground and eventually getting the submission win. Despite how good Charles looked in that fight, Gamrot is a grappler, and so of course the fight took place where Oliveira is strongest, which is on the ground. Do feel like Oliveira has some underlooked striking ability. Obviously, it's nowhere as good as Max's striking, but he can definitely land damaging strikes. But Max is a very hard guy to hurt. Despite getting KO'd by Ilia Topuria, I believe that Max has a decent chin, and he lost that fight because he was already mentally beaten before he even stepped in the cage. I think Oliveira may take him down 2 to 3 times, but I reckon Max has the bigger moments in the fight and wins a unanimous decision win. And that's going to be my full breakdown for UFC 326, Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram once again so that you guys can be the first to get my betting slips. Peace.